So here we go, my first set of tips on how to be more creative this year. I'll tell you what, usually not much of a fan of alliteration, don't find it very creative, but this week it just kind of worked, so bear with me here. I want to talk about being curious and critical and close. First, let's talk about curiosity. One of the problems that Jonathan Haidt points out in The Anxious Generation is that the way that screens are employed, in particular, the way that social platforms are engineered, has led to massive attention fragmentation. In particular, we've been trained to focus on what grabs our attention immediately. It's the efficiency of bricks on steroids. The problem is, in my 47 years and 50 some odd weeks of experience, the most important relationships, your next best friend, the person you will marry, the professor who will teach you the most about the thing you never wanted to learn about, even the Jesus who will offer to change your life, none of these will immediately grab your attention. At least not the way that TikTok will. Here's the truth. Real people, honestly, not that exciting. And that's okay. Because we are living with wildly unrealistic expectations of each other. We're imagining that the most fascinating things about someone will be sitting there on the surface of their lives in full view for all to see. That's not where the best things are supposed to be. The most fascinating things about us should be buried under a mountain of conversations born of an intentional curiosity. Because efficiency is not the goal in relationship. So one, if you're on social media, that's great. I am, fair play. Just make sure you leave a little bit of mystery. Save the best parts of your story for someone to discover in person. Not everything needs to be online. And two, you and I, we then need to work to intentionally build our curiosity. We need to practice asking questions. We need to exercise waiting for answers. We need to train ourselves to trust that if we work for it, we will uncover relationships we could not have imagined for ourselves. Which, by the way, goes for absolutely everything around you. There's so much to be curious about in this world. Romans 1:20 says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, eternal power, and divine nature, all have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made." God is seen in everything that's been made, both the rocks from God and the bricks from your neighbors. The divine is all around us, just waiting for us to cultivate the curiosity to look. Second, let's talk about being critical. Because as I've said, I'm not anti-brick, I'm not anti-smartphone, I am certainly not anti-technology. I find all of it quite fascinating. What I am fond of, though, is a hermeneutic of suspicion. And one of the easiest ways to think about what that phrase means is to simply ask, what is not being said here? When a company on the internet wants to give you something for free, how is that being paid for? What is the product that's actually being sold here? And is it you? That's a really important question to ask. Now, it might be a bargain worth making. That's fine. You should still ask the question. Because if we can't develop a critical eye for technology, what we'll find is that just like the ancient residents of Babylon, we are no longer the ones directing our own story. There's this passage in the Psalms, Psalm 20 specifically, it's David writing, and he's reflecting on some of the battles that he's engaged as a king and a warrior. But the language that he uses here, I think it's possible there's an element of callback to that exodus from Egypt and the break away from the slavery of bricks. He writes, "Some trust in chariots, but I will trust in the name of the Lord." When I read that, for me, what it brings up is that image of Pharaoh's chariot charging into the Red Sea, swallowed up by the Hebrew trust in their God. What did Pharaoh put his trust in? The malformed end of technological pursuit. Efficiency that leads to power, that leads to militarization, that leads to violence. And here, David is perhaps desperately trying to remain suspicious of that kind of power that he holds. He wants to save himself from putting his trust in the wrong places. A warrior that is suspicious of power, I like that. Because finally, I think we can talk about closeness. And what I mean here is the intentional refusal to insulate ourselves from our weakness. Any technology, take our houses for example, can make us think we are a lot more impervious than we are. It was a pretty nice week this week, but Calgary winters are a harsh reminder of our frailty. Now, my kids love to play outside, even when it's cold. Very proud of them for that. However, they also like it when I watch them play outside and not from the window, but close enough that they can yell, "Watch this!" I'll tell you what, it's a lot colder when you're watching than it is when you're playing. By the way, probably also my cue to get in there and start playing, which might also help with my creativity, so touche, children. What I'm saying is, the bricks that build our houses and the fintech that houses our retirement savings, all of this can make us think that we are a lot more self-sufficient than we really are. In fact, our technology can make us think that we, like Babel, don't need God at all. And I think that kind of hubris is the antithesis of creativity. Think about it this way. Once you have more money than you can possibly spend, and still the only thing you can think to do with your day is to get more, I think that's because you've run out of ideas. Now, bear with me. I'm not talking about wealth on its own. I know a lot of very successful people who are doing incredible things, but in my experience, they are driven by the fascination of creation, not the creative vacuum of accumulation. And one of the ways that we regain our creativity for ourselves, one of the ways that we recapture our sovereignty from our wealth and our technology, is to draw ourselves back for the source all that is good, to remind ourselves on the regular that everything we have is gift. Jesus says, pray this way, Lord, give us this day our daily bread. Lord, teach me to pray for just enough. God, help me to understand that's all I ever had to begin with anyway. Because if we can know ourselves the way that God knows us, beloved and cared for, not as our technological artifices would have us imagine ourselves, independent and self-sufficient, well, not only will we be more honest with ourselves and the world, we might also find ourselves less captured by the narratives that tells us what to make, what to gather, what to stack, what to accumulate. And then we might be more free to imagine what we want to create in the world. So if we want to be more creative this year, we can start by being more curious about the world around us and the people near us. More critical of the narratives that drive us to build and stack and accumulate, as close as possible to the source from which all creativity flows. Because maybe then we can use our bricks and our smartphones in ways that build the world for our neighbors rather than just towers that separate us from each other. What the world needs is a little more creativity from all of us, pointed in the direction of a world that is better for everyone.